week's Parsha is Parsha's Toldos, and Parsha's Toldos captures the essence of the struggle between two different views of reality, namely between Isaac's two sons, Yitzchak Avinu's two sons, Isaac, our father. One son was Esav, and one son was Yaakov, Jacob, and the struggle between the two of them for who is going to have the upper hand in this world. And in reality, both are powerful forces. Both are powerful human beings that God Almighty has created, each one with a purpose. But Esav, who was the firstborn, was very powerful, but used that power to focus on the material aspects of this world. And whereas Yaakov, who was less powerful, but used his time and his energy to study Torah, used his time and his energy to further God's vision in the world. Now, ultimately, God's intention is that both these sons will serve God, with the power of Esav being used to build great civilizations that are in service of God, and the power of Yaakov being used to teach Torah and bring the knowledge of God and holiness into the world. Those two are actually required and can work in a very symbiotic way. But the challenge is that so long as Esav is in a state of being drawn to the material and thinking the material is the be all and end all of creation, then he goes after those physical things in the world, the materialistic aspects of the world, and he's not interested in the spiritual aspects of the world. So the challenge for Yaakov is to recognize that in order for not only for himself to reach his potential, to reach where he's supposed to go, but for Esav to reach where he needs to go, Jacob has to stay on track, has to stay focused. The biggest mistake that Jacob can make is when he loses his sense of self-identity, he loses his sense of pride and becomes awestruck by the power of Esav, and then decides that he wants to try to emulate Esav or please this big, strong, burly guy who looks so powerful and so scary, and decides that he wants to be able to placate him. What we see is that in the Parsha, this was not the model that Jacob, our father, taught us. He taught us that the way to deal with Esav is to go full steam ahead and to say, for Jacob to say that he wants to have the ability to call the shots, to set the world on its proper course, to be able to guide humanity, to be able to show a direction for humanity and not let it descend into the selfish material, but rather to be focused on the service of God, and that all the materialistic things of the world could still be used, but they could be used for the service of God and for God Almighty. But we see that when in the times of exile, the Goen Yaakov, the pride of being a Jew, the pride of being a descendant of Jacob, could be temporarily concealed and submerged in a sense of having to somehow take care of Esav and what his goals are, and trying to somehow get along with him in order to make sure he doesn't beat the children of Jacob up. But that's not the real path of Jacob. The real path of Jacob was to be able to meet, as we'll see in the coming parshas, was be able to meet Esav head to head, in a way of actually being able to transcend Esav and being able to refine Esav, and that's fulfilled and completed in the coming of the complete and final redemption, when the entire world is going to come to serve God Almighty. The entire power of Esav is going to be put in, to harnessed in a productive way, that the materialism of the world, the raw strength of the world, of the non-Jewish nations, is going to be used for good things. And so we need to remember that. We need to take that into account. And when we're talking here about the power of Jacob, we're talking about the power of Jacob and all those, including the righteous Gentiles of the world, who already recognize that the materialistic, brutal attitude of Esav is not the way to go. It's the way that is going to actually, it creates a temporary sense of success. It may cause some people to scatter and to cower, but it's not a true victory. A true victory is when the divine spirit that's in every single human being is brought to the forefront and it's honored. And that's what Yaakov seeks to do. Yaakov seeks to bring to the forefront the divinity in every single thing in the world and to bring that to the forefront. So that's what's calling the shot. That's what's running the show. And it's only in our, so to speak, squirrely thoughts where we lose track of that and we start to think, oh, then maybe we've got to just go along with these brutal, seemingly powerful dictatorial impulses of humanity because that's the safest way to go. It's not the safest way to go. No one ever got anywhere by placating a dictator in the long run. The only way in order to be able to carry forward and change the world, not just to kind of hang out in the shadows and hope that it won't get too bad before redemption comes. The only way to change the world is to go forth with strength and determination, like Jacob, to be able to say that there is a God Almighty in the world. There is an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and to then go and to explain that directly to Esav and all his descendants, and then show an example for the Jewish people and for the entire world on how a Jew and how every human being is meant to conduct himself. This is such a great gift for Yaakov's children and such a great gift for Esav's children also, because they're not, just because they're going around looking all powerful, beating their chests and banging their swords on their shields, does not mean that they're in a place of menuchas nefesh and serenity and a place of calmness and a place of happiness. It just means that they're making a lot of noise. And that's why Yaakov is the one that in the quietness, Ish Tam Yeshav Eil, that he's a quiet person. He's able to be reflective. He's able to sit in the tents of studying Torah and there receive the wisdom, God Almighty's wisdom, that is not only for his own benefit, for the whole benefit of all of him, every single man and woman and child in the world. And that's what we will see the fulfillment of with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the coming of the final redemption. And the way to accelerate the coming redemption is to live in a way of faith and a certainty that this will materialize speedily in our days, and know that the big bully out there is acting like a big bully because no one's making the effort to refine him. No one's making the effort to help elevate him to a higher calling. So instead of being awed or afraid of the big bully, the answer is to calmly and lovingly, directly explain to the big bully why his conduct is not befitting a human being created in the image of God. And then that will affect the big bully, and it'll affect many of the big bullies until they will become refined. They will then see that their purpose in the world is part of a greater purpose that God Almighty has for each human being. And that's the special mission that Yaakov has in this world, that he has to see that he has this special power, and that he, even though he was not the firstborn biologically, but he had to step to the forefront to take that firstborn role and to have a struggle with his brother, both through the incident where when Asa was trying to was willing to sell the firstborn rights in return for a bowl of lentils, and how tragic it would be for the children of Jacob today to sell their birthright for a bowl of lentils and government handouts and government money for the schools and yeshivas and synagogues and so forth. That would be a terrible tragedy, to sell the birthright of the children of Jacob to Esav for a few bowls of lentil soup, which is what these millions of dollars of money that the government sends to Jewish educational institutions in order to bribe the administrators into fulfilling the will of the government, and to using the government textbooks, and to using the materials of the government, and using the government testing systems, and getting the kids to prepare for the government tests and regions, etc., because their goal is to have the Jewish people sell their birthright to the government in return for a few bowls of lentils. So the whole situation is completely reversed. On the contrary, it was Esav in the incident with Yaakov who wanted to sell the birthright for a bowl of lentils. So God forbid that any Jewish person would then sell his birthright for a bowl of lentils. But we need to understand that that is not the way that we would want to conduct ourselves. It's not the way in Yaakov. It's not the way of a person standing in the footsteps of our father Yaakov Avinu. And also this struggle to take the role of leadership is something that we see also in receiving the blessing that Isaac, the father, both these twin boys, saw that Esav had this tremendous power and saw his potential, wanted to bless him. But Rivka, their mother, saw that Esav himself, just getting the raw blessing, was not going to be able to use it well, and therefore she wanted Yaakov to take the blessing and to be able to get it in the place of Esav, so that he was the one that could be entrusted with the height of the blessing, to be able not only to take responsibility for himself and just benefit for himself, but to take responsibility for the well-being of his older, more powerful, more stronger brother. Yaakov would be the one that would be able to, in the long run, be able to provide the proper and tender and loving direction for his older brother and all his descendants, that would bring about a state of the world when every person would feel the loving kindness of God Almighty and feel and recognize that there's nothing besides God Almighty. And that's the time that we are coming upon right now, and that's what we are capable of doing. Everyone who has the eyes to see it and eyes and ears to see what's going on around us recognizes that we are in the last throes of Rigshu Goyim La'umim, the loud barrage of the screaming of the nations that are lost from the service of God Almighty, and particularly from the wayward grandchild of Esav, who was Amalek, who took upon himself to, even worse than Esav, Amalek took upon himself to fight against God Almighty, even though that he knew about his existence. This is just a lot of noise. There's a lot of bravado. It's not brave at all. It's just cowardly screaming and roaring to try to scare the rest of humanity into submission. So at a time like this, it's even that much more important for every person, particularly every descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and every person that has been inspired by the Torah and by the conduct of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to conduct ourselves exactly as Jacob would, fearlessly, with absolute determination, to in no way whatsoever to surrender the leadership role, but on the contrary, to take the leadership role and to recognize that the role of guiding the world and being the light into the nations is put into our hands for the tremendous benefit of every human being, every single man, woman, and child. And when we do that, we'll bring blessing to the entire world, that the whole world will be blessed to the activities of the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to bring blessing to the world, to bring abundance to the world. That God Almighty is providing the blessing. God Almighty is providing the abundance. All we need to do is open our eyes and see that it's here, and that we do not need to fear. We do not need to fear the people that insist on trying to scare humanity into thinking there's some form of scarcity. On the contrary, we could ignore their blandishments, ignore their foolish thinking, and point out to them and look them straight in the eye and say, my fellow man, my fellow woman, my fellow child, you have nothing to be afraid of. Your conduct is not befitting the conduct of a person created in the divine image of God, and therefore correct your ways and return to know that there's nothing besides God Almighty, and you too can have the exact beautiful life that God intends for every single human being. Life of abundance, life of blessing, life of abundant income, abundant health, abundant children, healthy children. And the key is going to be, with the revelation of all that, with the coming of the complete and redemption, the coming of our righteous Redeemer, Mashiach Tzidkenu, now it should be speedily, truly, and complete. Have a good Shabbos.